Hi and welcome back. I hope you've watched the talks from the last lecture, and in this one we're going to be turning our scraper that we created earlier on into an asynchronous scraper. Just to use the stuff that we've learned, and also a couple of things that were mentioned briefly in the talks that we're going to explain as well. So when we looked at scraping websites before, we sort of got up to 50 pages here, one after another, from our books.toscrape.com site, but it could be a bit slow because of all these pages. And if you remember, when we ran the menu, which I'm going to do just now, we then sort of had a period where nothing seemed to happen. And this was when the pages were all loading. And eventually, something appears once all the pages have loaded and we've extracted all of the books into our sort of master books list. I'm just going to exit this menu and collapse that. So if we could do this asynchronously, we could increase the speed massively. And the reason for that is as follows. What's happening here is that the first thing we're doing is we are sort of, creating a new string, fairly straightforward. Then we're requesting it and getting the page content. And then we're sort of logging something, creating our books page and sort of extending that. And the main improvement from using asynchronous requests, which we're going to look at soon, is in this line here, line 22. And the reason for that is because there are a few things happening in the background when we do this. This line starts a request to the server, sends some data to the server telling them, hey, I want to, start a connection to you. And then it has to wait for the server to respond. Once that connection is set up, it has to ask the server for the URL that contains the page content, and it has to wait for the data to come back. It has to download the entire page content and wait for all that data to come through. So as you can see, there were a couple of times there where we're just waiting for the server to give us something, to tell us that the connection has been set up, or to tell us that the data is now ready, and of course for us to download the data. And from what we've looked at in asynchronous programming, wait means potential improvements from using concurrency. In Python, we cannot run two things at once unless we use the multiprocessing module, but we could potentially send the server, hey, give me this, hey, give me this, hey, give me this, and then just wait for all three at the same time. The server will presumably be able to respond to these requests more or less quickly, and then we won't be waiting too long. We'll only be waiting for the server to respond to all three more or less simultaneously. Okay. Just as we did with our simple generator task scheduler, where we had our three countdowns and we sort of started one and then started the other and then started the other, and then we use next to go over each one, we're going to be doing something like that. We're going to be having a task scheduler, but we're going to use the Python async IO library in order to loop through the various tasks that we'll be creating, and each task is going to be responsible of fetching one of these URLs. So we're going to have a task per URL, and we're just going to start them all at the same time using yields, and we're going to sort of wait and resume and suspend them as data comes back. Okay. We're also going to be using a new library called AO-HTTP, and we've previously used the requests library, like we've done here. But the requests library does not allow us to make requests asynchronously. It just doesn't have that juicy yield statement inside. So AO-HTTP does have them, and it's all set up to be used with async IO. So we're going to be using that throughout this next few videos in order to turn this into an asynchronous web scraper. So also as a reminder, the async IO library is built in. AO-HTTP is a third-party library. So just a minor distinction. We're going to be looking through that in this section. So let's move on to the next video, and we'll start with making our first request with AO-HTTP. I'll see you there.